There it is. Okay. Great. So before the next legislative session, we at the Women's Fund have been gathering with our people for a series of public policy power hours to talk about the issues impacting women and girls, especially those that we're anticipating or preparing for the next legislative session. Our work at the Women's Fund is inclusive of all individuals who experience gender-based oppression. That includes transgender and gender expansive people. For us, all means all. And this conversation is particularly important as we participate in Transgender Awareness Week and observe Transgender Day of Remembrance and Resilience tomorrow, November 20th, to honor the memory of the transgender people whose lives were lost in acts of anti-transgender violence this year. So today, we'll be focusing our discussion on the ways in which our policy advocacy can support LGBTQ+ Nebraskans and work toward a future that recognizes gender justice, not just on behalf of women, but on behalf of anyone who experiences gender-based oppression. We don't know all the bills that will be introduced in the upcoming legislative session, which starts in January of 2022. But we do know that last year there were over 250 anti-LGBTQ+ bills introduced across the country. We are stronger when we all work together, and we need co-conspirators to make our state safer, more just, and more equitable for all. This work is powerful because it's focused on the freedom of all people. While others want to oppress individuals, we are on the side of joy and hope and liberation. But it will take a strong showing from all of us, including those with lived experience of marginalization and also powerful allies like all of us. All of you, to stop anti-LGBTQ activists from doing harm in our state. So today we can create a more just, equitable, and safer community for all, and we're so proud to support others who are in this work every day that are joining us for the conversation. I am really excited and honored to have a conversation today with Abby Swatsworth, who's the Executive Director of OutNebraska. Hi, Abby. And Sarah Rips, who is the LGBTQIA+ Legal and Policy Counsel at the ACLU of Nebraska. Hi, friends. And then you may see Heather down there in the corner. Heather's going to join us a little later for her portion of the conversation. So if we could start, I'd love for Abby and Sarah to tell us a little bit about yourselves for those of you who don't, or for those on the call who don't have the pleasure of knowing you. So Abby, if you want to get us started, and then Sarah, you could jump right in afterwards.
Terrific. Thank you, Tiffany. And thanks everyone for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I know that a lot of folks are zoomed out, but this is such important work, and for you to be here really means a lot. So thank you. My name is Abby Swatsworth. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director, as Tiffany said, of OutNebraska. We're a statewide education and advocacy organization and have been statewide since January of 2019. So we're a young organization in our statewide work, but we've been around probably 13 years or so doing LGBTQ plus work in our communities. Myself, I have a degree in social work and I'm a wife. My partner and I have been married for more than 20 years. And I'm also a kind of a newer grandma, which has been exciting for me. So that's just a tiny bit about me. And Sarah, you can jump in and introduce yourself.
Hi, I guess we're in good afternoon territory. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Rips. I am the LGBTQIA+ Legal and Policy Counsel for the ACLU of Nebraska. For those who aren't familiar with the ACLU, that stands for the American Civil Liberties Union. We are a nationwide organization that's over 100 years old and have been in Nebraska for over 50 years. You know, our main goal is to take up the toughest civil liberties fights, including the fights for LGBTQ rights. And as such, I am the only full-time attorney in the state of Nebraska focusing on LGBTQ civil rights.
Great, thank you. I just have to say how much I have learned from and appreciated getting to work alongside both of you. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing your time and expertise with us today. we'll start with the tough stuff and then maybe move on to some more hopeful things that we can talk about. I'll ask some questions to each of you, but then feel free to jump in, if the other one has things to add. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about potential legislation to ban gender affirming healthcare for trans youth in particular. Abby, I know we've seen this happen across the country in the last couple of years, or try to happen. Can you tell us a little bit more about the issue, what we need to know to be informed so we can engage if we should face such legislation in Nebraska?
I think Sarah's going to take the lead on this one, and they're already involved in a case, but I'm going to support that and jump in also. So Sarah, go for it.
Yeah, so last year, lawmakers set out just across the country to target trans youth with ill-conceived and dangerous bills that are basically just based on animus and not scientific fact. Unfortunately, like many organizations this year expect that wave of and trend of bills to limit medical care for trans youth, gender affirming care, and mental health care is still going to continue because we don't have pre-filing in Nebraska. We don't know for certain, but we have a suspicion. I think it's important to understand that a lot of times with this, and I think we saw this a lot with the State Board of Education, that people get conflated and confused ideas on what gender affirming care for minors means. The vast, and I mean the most vast, the far majority of cases do not involve surgery. In fact, it's very unlikely that children would receive surgical care or treatment for gender dysphoria. What they do receive, though, are hormonal treatments that are often called puberty blockers. These are basically a pause button on puberty. They've been used since the 1980s in children in various contexts. They are completely safe, and they also are reversible. So once a child stops taking them, then they would have the hormonal onset of puberty begin. So that's kind of an overview of like what it is. If you want, I can talk about a little bit about what this bill would do, which is it would basically, we don't know what would be brought in Nebraska. There have been two kinds that seem to be brought. Ones that involve criminal penalties, which means that the state would have to sue either parents or medical providers. And then one that has civil penalties to it, which means that it would be a private cause of action, basically, without the potential of jail time. But regardless of whether they target medical providers or parents or criminal or civil, all of these bills run counter to basic medical science, prevailing standards of treatment for transgender youth, and basic human dignity.
I think I'd add that part of the reason we have a suspicion the bill will be coming is that Nebraska Family Alliance, which is a Nebraska-based organization, has signed on to a national effort sneakily named Help Not Harm, based on this junk science that gender affirming care is harmful for young people. And they've signed on to that as a national movement and the Nebraska representation of that movement. And so that is where the suspicion that we may face that comes from. While we've had a lot of these introduced, there have only been a couple that were actually passed. So we have hope that we can defeat it. And in places where it has passed, such as in Arkansas, I do believe there's already a case happening to defeat it and roll it back. Some of the danger of this kind of legislation is that the rhetoric that comes out as people are debating the bill is really harmful to trans youth, right? talks about whether or not they even have a right to exist or whether they do exist as human beings. And that is just really harmful rhetoric. And we've heard from young people in our state already through the Nebraska DE or NDE health standards fight that that rhetoric is harmful and that it hurts young people. So that's just a little supporting information on that bill.
Thanks for sharing that, both Abby and Sarah. I think, there is some research to show in other states where anti-LGBTQ plus legislation has been advanced. There have been increased calls to suicide hotlines for young people. I mean, it's not just anecdotal, right? There is evidence to demonstrate that. So I also think it's important to raise up then the reason we need allies also to step up, right? Because we saw the way that young people were received and treated when they shared their stories in the work that we did around health education at the State Board of Education. And I'm going to give you the cliff notes that it was not great, right? And so asking young people to traffic their trauma in lots of ways and put themselves out there is not safe and not the best thing for them in many cases. So we all really need to step up in lots of ways. And so that's why I'm so grateful that you're joining us for this conversation today so we can have the tools to do that. I wanted to talk a little bit about another issue that we are seeing around restrictions in sports for trans girls particularly. So if y'all, can you give us a little background and insight into what we might see in that space?
Absolutely. So it is particularly an attack on trans girls, although some of the legislation in states that's been introduced is just like a blanket ban on trans athletes in general. But it really is coming from this mistaken place that somehow we have to protect women and girls in sports from unfair competition. There is this idea that somehow young men are going to pretend to be transgender so that they can compete against young women and win and gain more scholarships and just, win out in sports. But every young person who wants to participate in sports, really is looking for the learning experience of being a part of a team. It's about leadership development. It's about personal goal setting. And there's just a lot that young people gain from participating in sports. And there's really nothing to point to that says this is an issue in Nebraska or anywhere that, frankly, that it's being introduced. So again, it's sort of a red herring fight, and it's based in this sort of like fear mongering about trans women and trans girls. And we expect this to be an issue in Nebraska, following the governor's rhetoric, actually, in terms of some things that he has said in the media regarding biological males competing with women. Gender ideology is the language that he uses. And it's just really, again, it's just really hurtful language, and it's unnecessary legislation. It's trying to legislate something that doesn't exist. And again, it's just hurtful to young people. So that's another thing that we're sort of watching for. And again, as Sarah said, we don't have pre-filing, so we don't know for certain. And again, that's why these sorts of conversations can be so important.
And just to add to it, so last year there were 7 states that passed anti-trans sports bans, including Arkansas, which did too. They're very nuts there. But we already have rules in place regarding trans athletes in school sports. The Nebraska State Activities Association already has completely onerous and draconian rules. So to want to do this is just a way to fearmonger and drive up attention. The press and attention that you get from introducing these bills can often be greater than like the attention of actually enacting them. One of the things that I think is just like really important to when you're talking about this with
with other people. It's first, trans women and girls are women and girls. So there's no room to do what the governor does and talk about biological males or boys and girls sports. And just like Abby said, like, there are no citable examples of some young dude joining the girls cross country team so that he can then get that Oregon scholarship to run on the men's team. Like, that is not happening. But what is happening is that young people are being excluded from participation in sports, which I know this is going to hurt a lot of people because we're in Nebraska. Sports are made up. They are games that we play to stay in shape, to challenge ourselves, to be involved in physical fitness, to be a part of a team. And when we deny young people the opportunity to stay healthy, especially when their mental health is already at risk due to their sexual orientation or gender identity, to then deny them the ability to participate in activities that would, in many ways, help them and learn how to help them process feelings and do all of this, is just so offensive. And I want to make it clear that the research that everyone cites in favor of banning trans athletes has been absolutely refuted by the professor who did that research. She absolutely says that her work was misinterpreted and misused, and that she is in support of the NCAA's rule on athletics. So what they're citing doesn't even have credence from the person who wrote it.
Thank you for that, y'all. That was really important. And I really want to name and highlight again that trans women and girls are women and girls. So this idea that we are protecting women and girls by excluding women and girls is not something that we'll accept, right? So let's talk a little bit. Well, first of all, I want to ask either Abby or Sarah to explain. You both mentioned pre-filing before and that we don't have it. Can you explain to our listeners who may not be familiar with that term what you mean?
In some states, state senators can file ahead of session the legislation they intend to introduce, and in actuality, then introduce that legislation before their session begins. And Nebraska's unicameral does not operate that way. We actually cannot introduce legislation until session begins, and then can only introduce it for the first 10 working days of session, which is a little unique to Nebraska. In some legislatures, they can introduce legislation all session long and before session even starts. So that's a little bit. And did I miss anything, Sarah or Tiffany? I think that's how it works.
Yeah, I was going to say it saved us last year because a lot of the anti-trans bills that came up were introduced after our filing period was already finished. So that saved us big time last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already alluded to a little bit of the work that we all have been able to do together around creating inclusive and safe and welcoming environments in our schools. I was hoping, I think we can potentially anticipate some legislation that might challenge that goal. And I would love for you both to help us understand what those issues might be that we could be facing and help us understand a little bit more about them.
Yeah, so we may face some things like can't say gay, no promo homo. In other words, you can't teach about LGBTQ issues, can't have pride flags in your classrooms, can't teach as an authentic LGBTQ teacher in terms of being out in your classroom. We may face those sorts of issues. We may also face some sort of parental rights, school issue bills, things like if a student comes out in school, that the school would be required to out that student to their parents, which can be really dangerous, right? Because young people are still being ejected from their homes. And so that's some of the things we may face. And all of this comes out of the sort of uproar that was stirred up with the health standards work that we were, really pushing back against earlier this year. Anything you'd like to add, Sarah? I think you've heard some stuff from national too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, at least with like the school stuff, I think there are nebulous rumblings of what things might be. Also, I was told I sound like a robot, so hopefully this is better. One of that though is it is a very hard thing to balance. And because it's difficult to balance, it gives people who are anti-LGBTQ a way to make inroads with people who are uncertain. Like, for example, if you have a student who wants to use a different name and different pronouns, but they don't want their parents to know, it puts the school in a very difficult position where they are having to get however many people on board with something and then keep a secret from parents. And so I'm not a parent, but I have, an understanding that parents do not want to be left in the dark on important things with their kids. Wow. So it's important to understand, like, all of this is nuanced and it's complicated, but having a blanket ban on things is not the answer, because it doesn't allow for all of the nuance that's involved in sexual orientation and gender identity. And rather than adopting, sex ed standards that would help students, deal with this and understand it, we're fighting to keep this stuff just completely out of the classroom. But like, bad news, everyone, gay people exist. Like, we exist, trans people exist, and they have the right to be talked about when learning about school and see themselves reflected in their curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So since you just mentioned it, Sarah, could either of you, Sarah or Abby, give us a little update on the work? As we've said, we were all working together to promote health education standards that would be adopted by the Department of Education that were comprehensive and inclusive, and supported our LGBTQIA students just as much. And can you all give us an update on where we are in that process, what's happening, and what we know right now?
We don't know a lot because the process has sort of been shelved. The state school board decided not to move ahead with the health standards, and they are looking at the process of creating standards. And so we don't really know where that leaves us, but it does leave students vulnerable while there are not standards in place. And that's the one thing that we do know.
Okay, well, so now we get to pivot to some of the things that we're excited to work on. So now for the fun portion of the conversation, we got through the hard stuff. Let's talk about what things we can support that we're excited about. Abby, do you want to talk a little bit about the Equality Act at the federal level?
I would love to. It's something we've been doing a lot of work on. Nebraska is actually one of the target states. We are doing a lot of outreach with Senator Fisher. And organizing Nebraskans to contact Senator Fisher about the Equality Act. The Equality Act would update our civil rights codes and not only protect LGBTQIA plus folks, but also people of color, people who worship differently, women. It really expands the definitions of public accommodations and just modernizes the civil rights code. So, right now, if we drove from Maine to California as a queer person, my rights would change like a dozen times. And that patchwork quilt just really isn't working. And there are like 29 states that don't have comprehensive protections, and Nebraska is one of them. And so no matter where you live in Nebraska, you should be protected. And we can't rely only on Supreme Court cases for that protection. It needs to be more statute. So we're really encouraging folks over the holiday break to reach out to the senator, to, as an ally, talk about why it's important to you for the community to be protected. Yeah, and if you need talking points, you can reach out to OutNebraska, and we're hoping to do some more letter writing parties, getting people together to write letters, and yeah, so that's the Equality Act, and we're hopeful actually that we will get a vote early next year. So and we're optimistic. Everybody says, I don't want to be the last senator. I don't want to cast the deciding vote. If we could get them to understand that their votes are actually there, nobody's going to be the deciding vote. We have the votes. If we just cast them, we feel like this is our best chance to pass this legislation.
Awesome. How about at the state level, Sarah? There are a couple of bills that were introduced last year. Anything else that either of you that was introduced last year that you want to name, or that is coming that we're excited about?
Sorry, I got distracted because the Kyle Rittenhouse jury came back. It wasn't good, at least not for people who like justice. So LB 230 is LGBTQ plus housing protections. Basically, housing protections are important. People need safe places to live, so what LB 230 would do, which was introduced by Senator Hunt last session and carries over, provides a remedy in state law for Nebraskans for LGBTQ Nebraskans who experience discrimination in renting and buying a home. Public accommodations have long been at the center of our country's history of civil rights struggles, including lunch counters, hotels, public swimming pools, restrooms, and transportation centers. And it's so important because equal access to those kinds of public spaces is a predicate for full participation in public life. So when we can have people who are safe and housed, they become better quality citizens. It's wild. There's also LB 357, which is the Youth Bill of Rights for students, or not students, for youth who are in foster family homes, childcare institutions, youth rehabilitation treatment centers, and just general out-of-home placement. And that includes protection for LGBTQ youth. And this is particularly important because LGBTQ youth are more likely to suffer abuse, harassment, discrimination, and mistreatment in the foster care and juvenile justice system than other youth.
And another carryover bill is LB 231, which also introduced by Senator Hunt, which would ban conversion therapy across the state. And Lincoln passed a local ordinance to ban conversion therapy, and now we're hoping to build on that momentum to do that statewide. So that's all, and all of those are in committee, and we're looking to bring them out for debate and vote on the floor.
Great. Well, thank you all for covering a lot of ground in not a lot of time. Really well done. I want to pose a couple questions to get it rolling, but if folks who are joining us have questions for Abby or Sarah, please throw those in the chat. I want to talk about hope and what has given you hope in your advocacy work in this past year.
I think for me, the coalition building that's happening, the partnership between organizations like Omaha Women's Fund and ACLU Nebraska and OutNebraska and Black and Pink and IB Black Girl, and just a lot of people working together on issues has given me hope. And also, I know activating some of the organizations in other parts of Nebraska has given me hope. We had more pride activities happening even in the face of COVID. Like we had Alliance had a pride this year, Norfolk had a pride this year. Just a lot of activity. There's a new Facebook group going called CORN, which stands for Coming Out in Rural Nebraska, which I think is just the really cool name and just a support system for folks. But we're activating those folks into some advocacy work as well, and so that all gives me hope.
Oh, that's so great, Abby. Thank you for sharing. That gives me hope too. Sarah, I know it may be hard in this moment after reading what you're probably reading, but what's given you hope in the last year in your work?
I think that's like part of working for the ACLU, right? Like you have to have sort of a relentless optimism. Otherwise, I don't know if you can do the work. But there are many things. One of the things is in March, the Nebraska Supreme Court issued a unanimous opinion saying that married same-sex couples obviously can adopt children together. That's a huge win. It was written by Justice Castle. He's a well-known conservative and a textualist. And so the fact that he wrote this unanimous opinion gives me hope that our Supreme Court understands that LGBTQ people exist and that they deserve the same rights and respect and dignity as all people. I think it's been a very tough 5 years. I think we kept thinking it'll get better. But like Abby said, I think we found some really wonderful allies along the way and really worked hard to build strong coalitions of reason that really can help us support each other and build up all of the work we do to make our state really, truly the good life.
Coalitions of reason. I love that. I really love that. How can we support you? What support do your organization need in this work? Other than the monies, definitely the monies, give them the monies. But how should people connect with you if they're passionate or interested in any of the issues that we've talked about today or have other thoughts? What do you need? How can we all support you?
Yeah, Jill threw our website into the chat earlier, so you can scroll back up to that, or look, she dropped it in there again. Yay. There is a link on our website. You can sign up for our e-newsletters where we give a lot of information about advocacy work that's going on and how you can get involved. There's also a place to indicate that you're interested in volunteering, which could look like, making contact with your senator or reaching out to other people to contact their senators, and just being involved in that way also. So, go to our website, sign up, get involved. We don't spam, we don't share, rent or sell our list. And so, just ally voices are extremely important. It's great if you are a member of the community and you're on the call and you want to get involved, but if you consider yourself an ally, the time to speak up is now. We need you more than ever. And so just to not be afraid and create some brave space for yourself in doing this work.
Obviously, money is great. You can send it to me. I'll drop my PayPal in the chat. I'll make sure it gets to everyone. No, I think that there's a lot that you can do. Like Abby said, being an ally is essential. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I'm assuming this group is real hip. So I've heard rumors we're going to be on TikTok. I don't know. I don't have TikTok. But so that's a way you can share and engage with us on social media, positive stuff only, no haters. On top of that, talk to your friends and family about these issues. The holiday season is coming up. There's no better time to make your relatives feel uncomfortable, because when you talk about it, when you show your support, that influences people. And that's part of the way that we win the hearts and minds of people, is by showing it. And poll after poll shows that people in our state really, truly are supportive of LGBTQ rights. And just like Abby said, when you talk about it, when you share it, then people are thinking about it and they're talking about it, and you're doing so much wonderful work for us. Also, if you are experiencing discrimination, or your civil rights are being violated, or you know someone whose civil rights are being violated because they're LGBTQ, you can email me. My contact information is available on the ACLU Nebraska website. But please, if you know that this is happening, reach out to me. And if you don't want to reach out to me, reach out to Abby. But like, if you're experiencing discrimination, or you know people who are, do not stay silent. Speak up and let us help you fight these wrongs.
Well, thank you, Abby and Sarah. You both give me hope. I am so grateful for all your work, and at the Women's Fund, we are so grateful to be partners in this work, and appreciate all the ways that we get to work together. We are going to pivot now to some other exciting work that is being done in our community and in our state, and invite Heather Holmes to join us. Heather is going to tell us a little bit about the work she's doing through an organization called Owlish, and she's going to tell us about some exciting developments at the legislature that we can look forward to. So Heather, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Owlish.
And it helps if I unmute. So good afternoon, everyone. Heather Holmes. I just want to say I'm in awe of the women on this call. So Tiffany, Sarah, Jill, thank you for all the work you do every day. We talked a lot about transgender youth and LGBTQ youth. And if we're all lucky enough, we get older, right? And so the same issues that are happening with our trans youth and our LGBTQ youth happen with our elders. And there's no real focus in Nebraska on our elders. And so that's where Owlish was created. So I'm the founder of Owlish. It's a nonprofit that really focuses on advocacy, education, and policy for older LGBTQ adults. And so as part of Owlish, one of our programs is the Stonewall Social. So the fourth Thursday every month, we meet at the Intercultural Senior Center, and it's a group of individuals. We have anywhere from like 8 to 40. It kind of ebbs and flows who shows up, but we just really explore the question, what does aging in the community look like? Because as you know, like a late 30s, early 40s woman as part of the community, I think I have a good handle on what they might need and experience. I've worked in senior living for 20 years, but I really want their voices to take the lead and tell me what they need as they age. And then I'm here and I'm committed to doing that work with an awesome board and hopefully an expanding team here in 2022. So we do have the Stonewall Socials. And then we are introducing policy in January. So because of terrific work and partnerships with Senator Pansing Brooks and Senator Hunt, we're introducing an LGBTQ Elder Bill of Rights. And so this policy is either passed or it's in the works in 5 different states. And so we looked at what those that policy looked like. So some was Bill of Rights, some was anti-discrimination. One that we really liked that we researched was one in Maryland. And so we are taking some language from that to introduce it. And it really just gives more focus on this population, the LGBTQ older adults. And the Bill of Rights will have like definitions and language around protections for this group. So it'll have like clear anti-discrimination language. There will be things on there why, if there's physical examinations needed, why that is or isn't appropriate in senior living. It has language around gender expression, non-conforming, sexual orientation. So there's no protections for this population in senior living. And right now, there's not one senior living community that will say that they're inclusive. Often if I went in, say my mom was a lesbian and I went into a community and I said, you know, can my mom live here with her wife? The answer would probably be yes, absolutely. But if I dug deeper and I said, great, what do your forms look like? Are they inclusive? Does your staff have any diversity, equity, accessibility training? Do you show queer films? What does your staff look like? There's nothing beyond, yes, they can live here and we can take your money. And what we actually see is discrimination on other reasons why they can't live there. And we're seeing a lot of lawsuits currently in the Midwest of individuals that are LGBTQ not being accepted in communities and receiving care that's not adequate, and then being asked to move out as well.
Great. Well, thank you for that overview, Heather. It's really exciting work, and look forward to learning about all the ways we can support you at the Women's Fund. Can you tell our folks that are with us, how can they connect? How can they find out more about Owlish? How can they connect to the Stonewall socials? And how can they engage in the legislation if that's something that they're interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. So owlish.org is our website. So you can definitely go there, sign up for our newsletter. If you know anyone that's 50 plus, that's part of the community, please invite them to the Stonewall social. I've had younger individuals that are part of the community ask if they can attend. No, not really. I mean, it's just not a space for you. Like, we need a space for this group. And so we're really clear on that. And of course, we have a GoFundMe out there. So we are a newer organization. So filing in January and incorporating next year. So donations are always appreciated too. And if anybody knows of opportunities like this, for me to get in front of someone, share our mission, and talk about it, that's always a welcomed invitation as well.
Great. Well, thanks, Heather. Does anyone have any questions for Heather that they want to get in? You can toss them in the chat or the Q&A. This is your last chance. We're gonna close it up. If you have any pressing questions for Heather or me, I can try to help there.
Jill did drop a really important document in the chat too. So if you click on that state of older LGBTQ plus adults, that'll give you some metrics on why this is so important too. So just to highlight that.
And Heather, tell me again, is it Senator Pansing Brooks or Senator Hunt or both? Which one should we look to anticipate the legislation?
Sure. So Pansing Brooks is introducing and Hunt is co-sponsoring. If it gets out of Judiciary Committee and to the floor, we definitely expect pushback. I mean, our legislature doesn't even like calling people partners. So to lay out inclusive terminology on our Senate floor might be something that's shocking to some people. So I will be looking for testimony, and especially older adults who have been discriminated against. If anybody knows of those individuals that would write in or testify, please put them in contact with me.
Great. Well, thank you, Heather, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And so excited to see this work move forward. So support Heather with the monies as well, and all the ways. And her contact information is available in some of the links that have been dropped in the chat. So thanks again, Heather, for joining us. So we're gonna get closed up today, let you out a little early, just as a reminder and to tie up some of the themes that we've talked about today. It's important to take action and get involved, but this work is not just for members of the LGBTQ plus community. This is also a place where allies can step up and be important advocates and be vocal advocates, utilizing privilege in a space that you may have and safety, use that for the betterment of all in our community. Also want to encourage you to check your state senator, make sure it's the same person. They completed redistricting over the summer, and so the boundaries of some districts may have changed. So if you go to nebraskalegislature.gov, there's a Find Your Senator link. You can check your district to make sure you still have the same legislator. I would encourage you to reach out early and often to let them know that you support equity for all Nebraskans, including our LGBTQ plus folks and friends. Also, you can join us for our next Public Policy Power Hour. Will be on December 3rd. We'll be talking about legislation that we're anticipating to support survivors and to create communities that are free from violence all across our state. You can check out our awesome Public Policy Power Hour playlist that our beloved Jill Hagan puts together for us. You can follow us, the Women's Fund, on Facebook and Twitter to find out about more opportunities like this, as well as to follow legislation as we look towards the next session. And then finally, if you value and appreciate the work that we do at the Women's Fund, Jill has put a little information about supporting our work during Giving Tuesday on November 30th. Your work, any amount, or your donation, any amount, really supports our work and ability to do this. But I would also encourage you to support our other friends who are on the call today, ACLU of Nebraska, OutNebraska and Owlish with Heather. So thanks again for joining us. We look forward to working with you in all the ways to create opportunity for all those who experience gender-based oppression. So thanks for joining us.